In 2023, I lost my apartment, I lost my job, I lost my box trucking business, and I lost the vehicle that I had for a couple of years, all in one, like, a couple of months. So I started a box trucking business, but we're going to start with my job. The job I had was as an assistant conductor for SEPTA Regional Rail. For those who don't know, SEPTA is a transportation company in the southeastern region of Pennsylvania. Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. So I was an assistant conductor on the railroad side. So I worked on the commuter trail, the trains that went to like the suburbs and places like Trenton, New Jersey, and Wilmington, Delaware. Okay, so I did that for 3.5 years. Um, in the end of December of 2022, I started a box trucking business. With the box trucking business, my first load in one night, I made $800. And when that happened to me, I was still with SEPTA. I was still an employee, but I was on leave because my wife was pregnant at the time, and she was high risk pregnancy. And the box trucking business, that gave me a push to like go hard with that. When I was working at SEPTA, I was making like $900 to $1,000 every week after taxes. And then I go and start a box trucking business to make $800 in one night. I'm like, why would I go back to that when I can make this in one night? So I'm thinking I don't need SEPTA anymore. But with the box trucking business, it wasn't a consistent run. Like that one night I got lucky, but then I had a truck from Penske. And mind you, anybody in the box trucking business know, like Penske is the most expensive company to rent trucks with. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't do my full research on all the companies. They were the easiest ones to get with at the time. I just said, hey, let me just go with them. That's what I thought. I went with Penske. They gave me a truck. I paid like, it might have been $1,900. I paid like $1,900 for the rental. And I made my first payment a week later. But as time went by, I wasn't making payments because I was scrambling to get loads. It wasn't that easy to get loads. And the only brokers I was working with at the time was called TQL, the freight brokers. And they were real picky on who they give loads to. You have to have an authority for 6 months, or they checking your MC for all kind of stuff. They're looking for every reason to not give you a load. So that's what I was dealing with. And my main goal with the box trucking business was to get on with Amazon Relay. It took me 4 weeks just for them to tell me you got approved. And by the time I got approved, my DOT was about to get expired because the payment that I made for my commercial insurance got returned. So yeah, I pretty much started the business with no money. Anybody going into the trucking business, I'll tell you right now, don't start with no money. Don't start with bad credit. Take that from me. So yeah, and right after my DOT went inactive, my wife gave birth to my youngest daughter. She was born prematurely. I mean, she was born at 36 weeks, but that was considered premature. She wasn't full term, but she came out okay. No health complications. Everything was good. And the reason being was because part of the reason why my wife had to deliver early, because my wife had liver issues. And that was caused due to the apartment that we were living in. The apartment was mold infested. So during the time she gave birth to her, we had to stay at another apartment on the complex that we were living in. A week or two after she gave birth, we moved back into our regular apartment. They replaced like all the areas that had the mold. They took down the drywall. They replaced the wood and everything. And then a month or two after that, I went back into my trucking business. I remember when I got my tax return, I invested some of that money to pay for my commercial insurance. Weeks after that, I had got a loan from my mom's husband, my stepfather. I got a loan from him. I told him about the business, and he said he's going to give me a loan. He just wanted my business plan. He told me it sounded like a good idea. He gave me the money. I rented a truck with budget this time. They were cheaper, but the way how they did their payments was like, I will make a deposit, and the following week they would give me that deposit back, and they would take whatever money that was owed to them for that week that I was working. So let's say my deposit was 1,615. Whatever I made, however many miles I drove the truck during that week after I gave them the deposit, they would charge me the money. They would charge me for the amount of miles I've driven and how long I had the truck for. And they would give me back my deposit, and then they would take it back again. So the deposit would go in and out every week. That's how Budget did it. And they told me in order to stop that from happening, I would just have to give them a check of the deposit, and they will hold on to that. And whatever, how many miles I drove the truck for, they would only charge me for that and how long I kept the truck. So I was doing that from April 22nd up until June. I was doing my trucking business. Had a couple videos on my TikTok saying I'm back in the trucking business for good. And, it was okay run. I made $800 again, but this time it was with Amazon Relay. That first time I did it, it was a over-the-road load with TQL. And, yeah, just strictly Amazon Relay and some over-the-road loads. Amazon Relay, they was real strict on how you on time, if you late, whatever, all of that. They look at all of that. So that can mess up your score. If your score gets messed up, you don't get that much work. You're limited to the amount of good loads you can get. Like, you'll get loads, but they're not going to pay as much as if you have a good score. So the loads I was getting was like $250 for one load. And them loads was crazy because I would have a full truck and I'm only getting paid like $250 for that one load. And it's postal run. So I was delivering to like multiple post offices. And then I did a couple over-the-road loads. I went out to Florida, went out to Massachusetts, going back and forth to Delaware, Delaware to Virginia, Delaware to Florida, Delaware to Massachusetts, and different parts of the Northeast and the East. And by the middle of June, I remember the car that me and my family was using, the transmission was blown because I was using that car to do Amazon Flex on the side. So the transmission blew. They said it was going to cost me like $2,300 to fix the transmission. It was a 2012 Dodge Grand Caravan. I didn't have no money at the time. And during the time this was happening, my authority was about to go inactive. It was a whole mess. I was unemployed. I called back SEPTA because I remember they had given me another chance right before I got that loan from my stepfather to come back to work. I did everything with the union. We grieved it, whatever, because I was out on that leave and I was out for too long. So they said, we're going to give you a final chance. You can come back to work and start working. Just build your points. Just let your points go back down, because they have a point system there too. Let your points go back down, and you can keep working, you can continue your career. And I'm like, I'm doing it because my wife is saying, hey, you need the job, just stick with the job. I know you want to do the business, but just stick with the job. And my whole mentality was I didn't want to be in any working environment anymore. I want to work for myself. I want to be my own boss. I don't want to be the guy going to work doing the same thing every day. It's as much as how I love trains, I just didn't feel like it was no growth in that. I didn't like being around certain coworkers. I didn't like the work environment, seeing the same people every day with their mopey attitudes that got to get up and go to their jobs in downtown Philadelphia all the time. And it's a lot. I just wanted to be on my own and just work for myself and make my own money. But after all of that, I reached out to SEPTA. They said, nah, we can't take you back. We already discharged you. I didn't even know I was discharged until I called them and asked them if I still have an opportunity to get my job back. And they were like, oh, no, Jamal, yeah, you're a no call, no show. Like, we can't take you back. So I tried to get my job back with them. That wasn't working. And what was crazy was I tried out for more railroad jobs in a span of 2 months. Got denied for all of them. The next opportunity I tried out for was the Long Island Railroad. I drove all the way from Newark, Delaware to Babylon, New York. That's the middle of Long Island. I got up 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was an interview. It was an assessment session. I didn't even make it to the interview. It was an assessment session. I'm mixing my words up. My thoughts is rambling. My head is all over the place right now. So They had an assessment session out in Babylon, in Long Island. I drove all the way from Newark, Delaware, where I was living, and I made it right. I barely made it, just right on time, like 2 or 3 minutes before the assessment session started. And I didn't do good on the assessment. That was one of the longest rides I ever had. I had to drive all the way back because I always wanted to work with the Long Island Railroad. That's like the #1 railroad I ever wanted to work for as an engineer. And I drove all the way back to Delaware. I was mad. I was pissed. A few weeks later, I applied for Amtrak for a conductor position in D.C. Got an interview with them. I thought I was this close because a lot of people from SEPTA left SEPTA to go to Amtrak. And when I got to the interview and I told him I was from SEPTA, the guy was like, "Oh, a SEPTA brother." So I'm thinking, okay, I got some rapport built right there. You know, they know I'm from SEPTA. They know I have understanding of the position. Did the interview and everything. I don't know what went wrong in the interview. I guess they were asking some questions. I was kind of like, I don't know, a lot of these jobs, they have this, what they call it now, star process when they're interviewing people. And that was my first time doing it because it's been a long time since I interviewed for a job since SEPTA. That was the last job I ever had to interview for. I had a job since 2019 up until 2023. So I had to get back into the interviewing for a job, brain set again, and it's like, oh, I gotta do this all over again. But fast forward, didn't get the job. A week later, just send me an email saying I didn't get the job for Amtrak. Okay. New Jersey Transit, another engineer position. So I drove all the way from Newark, Delaware to Maplewood, New Jersey. I had to do an assessment session similar to Long Island Railroad. I didn't finish in time. They told me I failed. I drove all the way back to Delaware again. But this time my mindset was like, okay, keep a positive mind because you never know what can happen. Keep a positive mind. I wasn't as mad as I was with the Long Island Railroad. So I just try to keep a positive mind. I drove all the way back, and I applied for Metro North Railroad. So they scheduled me for a similar assessment test in the end of August of that summer of 2023. I drove out to New York for the assessment session, and I got there late. The assessment session was in downtown Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. There was no parking anywhere. I was so furious. I was pissed. I was angry. I'm like, bro, I just drove all the way from Delaware. Like, I was driving on the shoulder on the New Jersey Turnpike and everything just so I can get around traffic. I don't care if I was going to get pulled over by a cop. That's how dedicated I was to make it to the session. And I didn't make it in time. So I couldn't get that job. Fast forward to September of 2023. And mind you, in all this time, I'm late on my rent. I'm asking my mom, you know, she could help chip in, you know, assisting me with my rent or whatever, because I'm in between jobs. I'm collecting unemployment from SEPTA at this point, and I applied. The last thing I wanted to do, I applied for this Amazon DSP driver position in Wilmington, Delaware, and I started doing that by the beginning of October. So prior to SEPTA, I had a couple of delivery jobs, and I thought I leveled up. You know, I ain't got to work at the post office, FedEx, or Amazon anymore. You know, I'm working on the railroad. The railroad was like the easiest job I ever had. Here I am back at Amazon delivering packages again. Dealing with toxic coworkers, just this toxic environment, being around a bunch of people that don't like their job, doing whatever the hell they want to do, just acting up. It was crazy. That was like one of the most devastating moments in my life. And there was more after that, but I just want to focus on 2023. So I was working with the Amazon DSP company in Wilmington, Delaware, up until the end of December. By the end of December, we had to leave our apartment in Newark, Delaware, because we was late on our rent payments and everything. So we pretty much got evicted, but not evicted. So we moved out before the eviction date. We got another apartment in Elkton, Maryland, and I'm gonna talk more about that story. But yeah, I lost my job at SEPTA. I was discharged from SEPTA weeks after I started my box trucking business. My box trucking business, that crumbled down. I made $12,000 a month for the 2 months I was doing it again, from April to June. I was making $12,000 a month. and I lost the trucking business. I had to give back my truck. My DOT was inactive again. My car that me and my family was using from 2020 up until last year, the transmission blew out. I wound up getting another car. That's another situation to talk about. All the railroad jobs or railroad companies that I wanted to work for got denied from them. I didn't go through with them. Lost my apartment that me and my family was living in from 2021 up until last year. Yep, that's my story of 2023.